Alrighty, welcome everyone to Mindset of a Champion, episode 1, season 2. Today, I'm joined by Anthony Diehl. Anthony, man, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Hey, it's great to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, why don't we get started with the usual question? How did you find yourself competing in strength sport?
I've always played sports as a kid growing up, grew up outside, played basketball, played soccer. Um, and let's see, I went to college. And when I went to college, I gained like the freshman 15 or the freshman 50, honestly. I got pretty big and I wanted to get lean. And I had a friend start working out with me. And I lost like 90 pounds in about 6 months. It was crazy. I ran every day. I knew nothing about nutrition. I just knew I ate a lot of junk food and I should eat lots of meat and lots of vegetables. So that's what I did is I just started eating meat and vegetables at every meal. And I saved one day. I let myself have one day a week where I could just eat whatever I wanted. So again, I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying I didn't know anything. This is how I started. And I ran every single day. Now, I was not a runner. I was always kind of the chunky kid. So I went into the gym and I said, I'm going to run as many laps around this gym as I possibly can. And that first day was 6. I ran 6 laps. That was it. And I said, I'm going to add a lap every single day, period, the end. And so I did. And I lost about 90 pounds and I got down to 160 pounds. So like 85 kilos, 80 kilos, something there. And I got really thin and I got good at running. And then I kind of injured my hip. And a buddy of mine was like, well, since you can't run right now, come to the weight room with me. And I'm a very competitive person by nature. So I went to the weight room and I see all these guys lifting and I'm weak. I can't do anything. I barely do push-ups. I'm doing some push-ups, pull-ups. They get me into lifting. And it was great. I had a lot of fun. I lifted all through college. Unfortunately, I lifted like an idiot. And what I mean by that is like chest and triceps and biceps, like 3 to 4 days a week. And, legs like once maybe with a leg press, right? So no squats, hardly any deadlifts, things like that. It's all right. You live and learn. So I got married after college and started training at a local gym where we lived. And one day my buddy just says, hey, we're doing farmers carries out back. Do you want to join us? I said, what's that? And we go up back and he's this little string bean of a guy. At this point, I'd gotten a little bit bigger because I was always the kid that could pack on muscle pretty quick or fat, just, depending. So he's a string bean and he picks up, 225 per hand and just runs. And I thought, oh, I'll be able to do this all day long. And I pick it up and I just look like a drunk baby deer. I mean, I was wobbling everywhere. I couldn't handle it. And I thought, I don't know what this is, but I got to get better at it. So he said, hey, we train strongman every Saturday at this guy's house to show up. So I showed up and they introduced me to log presses and stones and farmers carries. And that was it. That was the addiction, man. I was hooked. And I've competed in my first contest in 2013. Now here we are like 8 years later and competed like 35 times or something like that, something crazy. Compete 5 times a year basically. And I love it. Absolutely love the sport.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's very interesting as well, actually, in your case that you started as a lot of people do in high school, just doing whatever, just being fit and training for the sake of training and not really following a program or having a specific focus. But then you got you got into strongman specifically quite quickly. Whereas I find a lot of people, they go bodybuilding and then powerlifting, and then eventually they get the strongman bug, and that's like, this is where I fall into the
I
niche.
knew the second I knew that I really enjoyed it because I had been training like a power lifter for a couple months before that, just mainly focusing on the big 3. And it was cool and all. I like to be strong. But another thing too is my father-in-law and my dad are both construction workers. They're strong dudes. And I thought, every time I'm with them working, they outwork me. Like they could just outwork me. And my father-in-law has a landscaping business and he can just throw equipment around. We're moving rocks and doing this and that. I'm like, in a gym, I'm stronger than them. Like if we lay down on a bench press, I'm going to out bench press my dad. Or I'm going to out squat my dad. But when it comes to real life, actually functional strength, I'm a wuss compared to these guys, And they just have that old man, like tough strength. And I thought, Strongman's a lot more functional because you actually, this is what you do in life. You pick things up and you carry them. And powerlifting's boring. Like, listen, I've coached powerlifters and it's great. I think it's impressive, but a powerlifting meet is boring as hell. That's like the most boring thing I've ever been to. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're here 9 hours later and we're just doing the same 3 things over and over again. And so again, I'm still impressed by it. Like I follow it, but Strongman is so much more fun. Then you combine that with my personality is very much, if I'm into something, I'm all in. I have to be very careful about what hobbies I take up because I can't just, it's hard for me to be an amateur at anything. Like I want to be as good as I possibly can be at that thing. So I have to just be careful and I can't have too many hobbies, but I knew right away that Strongman was going to be something I was really into. So I pretty much, one of the things that helped me out was I got a coach pretty much right away. Like within the first 4 months, I was like, oh, I'm competing. I don't know what I'm doing. You write my programming, tell me what to do. I'm gonna do it and let's do this thing. So I was all in like pretty much right away.
Yeah, which is understandable given that you kind of fell in love with the sport doing it,
Right.
but also you had those role models who kind of did strongman without doing strongman,
Right.
being just very physically prepared and
just capable, just very capable men. Yeah.
That's an interesting way to put it, actually, because that's something that I find appealing about strongman in general. It is about physical preparedness and capability. If you have an implement in front of you that's odd, you're going to figure out how to lift it and carry it and load it or whatever you need to do. It's strength.
Yep. Just we're going up this weekend for Memorial Day camping with our family. We have a place we go to. And just last year we were up there and we here in America, we love our guns. So we all had about 50 different rifles. We're going to target shoot and just play for fun. But we needed to build a new target because we had shot the crap out of the other one. It was about ready to fall over. And there were these railroad ties there, big, long, 12-foot railroad ties. And those suckers are heavy. They're a couple 100 pounds. And my Uncle Mike was like, hey, man, we got to load these in the back of the truck. Do you think you can move this? Because, we don't. And for me, it was a challenge. I'm like, yeah, I can absolutely move those. Let's go. And so loaded up the whole truck with the back, with these railroad ties. It was awesome, and that's something that's functional and practical and real. And just working around the house and things like that, being able to be physically fit and capable to do those things. Strongman translate, but it's just a lot of fun to push yourself,
For sure.
See how far you can go.
So when you got into strongman and you decided, right, I'm going to go all in and I'm going to get a coach, was that always in lieu of competing and becoming a competitive athlete, or just to get better at the sport?
Just to get better at the sport. I just wanted to get better at the sport because I knew that if I wanted to be, I knew I didn't have the skill, necessary at that time to program. And I wasn't trying to coach or anything like that. I wasn't coaching people at that point. So I wanted to learn and I wanted somebody else to tell me what to do. So I said, hey, you write the program, I'll execute it. Well, let's do this. Just get me as strong as possible.
Right. And it kind of removes some of the thinking as well. Yes. Point and shoot. You get to the gym and do what you need to do.
I'm still at a place where for my big competitions, obviously I coach a lot of people, but I still get a coach. I think every coach should have coaches from time to time. I think it's important that you get another set of eyes on your training. Because as much as we would like to say that, we assess other people, why can't we assess ourselves? I still think a lot of times we have blind spots about our own capabilities. And so for me, when I have big shows coming up, I'll always outsource my training to somebody else. It lets me learn in one sense to pick another coach's brain on things. But then two, it's kind of accountability because, when I'm reporting to somebody else, I want to do the plan as written, but they're going to put things in there that are going to challenge me, things maybe that I wouldn't put in for my own program. So I think it's important from time to time. I don't have coaches year round, but I do for some of my bigger shows.
Right. So it gives you that sense of accountability, but also challenges you because you have something in front of you that it's within your control to complete, but not necessarily in your control to put forward. Exactly. Because a lot of athletes, especially at a high level, tend to either under or overestimate themselves chronically and maybe not find that sweet spot.
And it's interesting. I think I've been guilty of both at times. There have been times where all I want to do is max out, right? What guy doesn't? They just want to push to the point of injury, and then you set yourself back. And then there's been times where I've had a coach just be like, here's what I think a lot of people do. As a coach, I see this. A lot of guys specifically, they will constantly overestimate their capabilities on the main compound lifts, the ones that look good on Instagram. And then they will underperform and underestimate themselves on their accessory work. And if they would switch that mentality a little bit and, conserve a little bit on those main lifts and those main movements, but then when you get to your accessories, take it seriously. Don't just fly through 4 sets of 12s of lateral raises or whatever the case might be, but give some intensity to that. I think a lot of people would stay healthier and they would get stronger faster if they do that. But they just got to switch the mentality of both of those.
I couldn't agree more. I don't want to inject my own perspective in too much, but that literally, I was having a conversation about this today, with a client, and truly, especially in very specific strength sports like powerlifting, I've seen it be very, very true, very consistently. They'll hammer the SBD, but then the accessories are
Right.
behind
Oh,
the
I've been
wayside.
guilty of it. I've been
We all
guilty of it.
have, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I don't lift. Sometimes I've been lifting with music occasionally. I don't like to lift with music a lot because I just kind of like to mimic contest scenario where the noise is kind of white noise out here. And I don't like to rely on external stimulus that I won't have on competition day. So, but I've been guilty of, I'll go in the gym and I'll focus really hard on my main movement, maybe my secondary movement. And then I pop the headphones in and it's like, how fast can I just pound through these accessories and get out of here? Go get my meal. And it's like, this is stuff that doesn't, and I just think, man, if I would, push a lot harder on those accessories. This last year when I did that, when I had a coach that pushed me really hard on everything, I won America's Strongest Man. And I want, okay, well, there you go. He had me ready and peak performance for that. So
Right.
It works.
Yeah, and you have that relationship that's also there's like a kind of a camaraderie that keeps you motivated as well. No matter how good of an athlete you are, how intrinsically motivated you are, how much you love it, when you have someone telling you you're doing a good job, you tend to want to do more of a good job.
Right. Exactly. That's right.
But you just mentioned actually you recently had a very successful year,
Yes.
winning America's Strongest Man under 105.
Yep.
Which is incredible. How did you find yourself preparing for a show like that as opposed to lower level shows?
Sure. It's interesting. I think I love the sport so much. I just love competing. And actually, I don't think I prepared a whole lot differently. I knew the gravity of the show, but I like to have fun with it. And the best way for me to have fun is to do well. So I work really hard so that I do well. Right. I think I'd been guilty in the past as an amateur of being somebody who had their better performances in the gym and then just wouldn't show up on game day. And then another thing I was guilty of is I've always been a good presser to the point where I can't think of an amateur show where I lost a pressing event. And the pressing is usually first. So I always usually had the luxury of coming in, getting a bunch of points on the board, and then kind of competing to not lose my lead. And so it was more of a fight to stay where I was rather than a fight to finish well, if that makes sense. And so the year that I won my pro card was actually the biggest lesson for me because I just ate shit on the log press, which is silly because log press is one of my best events. I mean, I've vipered a 360 log and it was 280 pounds on the log for reps. And I only got 4. I got no reps on one of them. And it's because they put calibrated plates on. So when I cleaned the log, my intention was to viper it. When I cleaned it, the plates didn't spin. It was like cleaning a fixed axle. So the log just kind of got stuck right here and I ended up pushing out in front of me and it messed with my head. I panicked because I went in with such arrogance to that lift. I didn't take it seriously because I'm a good presser. So I thought I'm going to do what I always do. I'm going to kill it on the press and so I was like, wow, that really sucked. I did okay on the deadlift. Very next event. After that, I tore my hand wide open on farmers and I did well, but I would have done even better had I not done that because I dropped them. Picked it up, my hand's full of blood. I still finished. Like I said, I did well, but at the end of day 1, I was in 6th place. And I did the math. I'm like, the only way I can possibly, earn my pro status is I have to, on these next events, I have to get 1st or 2nd in everything, period. And somebody has to drop out of the top 5. Now, I can't control what other people's performances were, but I can control my effort. So I came back and I got a first and second places on the other events. So I did what I had to do. And it was a good eye opener for me I had to fight to get my spot that year. I had to push hard. And I wasn't used to doing that. I was used to starting with points on the board and then just kind of doing just enough to keep my place. So that was a good learning for me. And then I kind of gained a lot of respect from the pros because that was in October, and 2 weeks later was America's Strongest Man from the year prior. So I just did I went from amateur nationals, won my pro status. 2 weeks later, I do my first pro show with zero preparation, none. And mind you, I cut from about 255. So I had a 25-pound water cut back to back, like within 2 weeks I had to do.
Wow.
So I get home from nationals, my body is trashed. I do another water cut. I showed up at America's Strongest Man and I beat 5 of the pros with no training, pressed a 360 log, pulled 967 on the 18-inch deadlift. Like I repped a 400-pound stone, 185 kilo stone for 2 or 3 reps. Like, so I did really well with no preparation. And then my training had gone pretty well all year long. And I knew when I saw the events that I was going to be a contender. I knew I'd do well. My goal was top 5 going into the show, which again, this also has changed my perspective. Now my goal is just to win. Any show I do, my goal is to win. And so I'm still learning like these mindset things, but I knew I would do well. And I just wanted to show up and execute and perform better than my training, which very much happened at day one. And it's just interesting, I'm not a very good circus dumbbell presser. It was 210 pounds, which is ridiculous for reps. And everybody was struggling with it. And I got 2 reps with it, which was great for me. Historically, I mean, the year before, I would have zeroed 170. Wow. And so to add that much weight, I got it. Okay, there's some solid points on the board. Event number 2 was the deadlift, was the car deadlift. It was 675 in the hand. And I'm not known to be a deadlifter. And I just murdered everyone on that event. I pulled 12 reps, which it's just adrenaline, perfect positioning. Like, I mean, I was just going, the crowd's cheering. I just kept going until I couldn't. I got to the end of day 1 and, I was in the lead. I was in first place. And I was like, oh my goodness, like I could podium. And I said that to a friend, actually, Nick Camby, the guy who just won Clash on the Coast. He was on my tail. He was 1 point behind me. He's like, you're doing great, man. I was like, bro, I could podium. He's like, you're winning. Why not do it? And to be honest, I thought he'd beat me because Nick's an amazing athlete. Like he just won Clash on the Coast handily. I don't know if you saw that. He broke the
definitely
axle record of 417 pounds. And so if Nick and I compete 10 times, he beats me 9 of 10. Like it's just, that's how it is. He was just having an off weekend and I was having an off weekend. Like I was on point, doing everything I should do. And I look back at that contest and I really didn't have any screw ups. Like, I competed to the best of my ability and I performed better in a contest than I did in training, which is what I wanted to do. That was my entire goal. And, I would say it was probably my best coached contest. I had a lot of people on my side give me really good tips, even things like the arm over arm truck pull. A lot of guys were leaning forward and literally using their biceps and their back to pull it. And the platform was smooth. I'm like, what? My legs are stronger than my back and bicep. So I reached out as far as I could. The second they said go, I pushed my butt down there and I leg pressed that thing back and then finished with a pull. So I was scooting down and leg pressing the entire time and finishing with a pull versus just leaning forward and using my back and biceps. So everybody else is getting done. Their biceps are cramped. Their back is sore. It was my glutes. Those were my glutes and hamstrings because I was just reaching forward and scooching down on that platform as hard as I could and just driving off that platform with my legs as hard as possible and then finishing with a little pull. So, but I learned that from JF Caron and some of my clients who are Canadian who gave me some tips. They gave me tips on grip, like for the rope. So, a lot of guys were slipping on that rope. And so I washed my hands with rubbing alcohol to dry them out, put a thick base layer of liquid chalk. Once that dried, I put regular chalk. So as you're losing that regular chalk, then it's starting to eat into that liquid chalk underneath. And I mean, my grip held the entire time. And grip is also not a strong point for me. And so I think it was just little tips and tricks like that and coaching and then just peaking. Obviously I was coached well. So I was in peak performance and just ready to go. And honestly, I was there having fun with my friends. and that's the biggest thing for me is I just want to have fun. And I'm not an angry lifter. I'm not one of these guys who like puts on death metal and just like channels some existential angst and goes and rips it off the ground. Like, I want to be, everything's right with the world. We're all having a good day. Everybody's here having fun. Oh, look, it's my turn to lift. like I'm a happy mindset lifter. And
Yeah.
so they're having a good time with my friends. And yeah, I think the biggest thing was consistency. And I did what I was capable of doing and didn't have a lot of technical errors. So it just went my way. So yeah, it was a fun show for sure.
Awesome. I mean, anyone who's listening to this who is a strongman competitor, take note of those tips, because specifically that arm over arm one, very, very interesting actually.
Yes.
How to not fall into the trap of just using your arms.
Well, it also depends too, but here's the key though for that, because a lot of these guys, if they're amateur shows, they'll be sitting in a tire. There's not a whole lot of ways to fix it. If you're sitting in a tire, you're going to have to use a lot of arms and back. So I think the key here is also just knowing your contest conditions. And of course, in strongman, you got to be ready for anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
I never trained with a truck. I trained with a weighted sled on turf. That's all I had.
Right.
But it's those little tips and tricks, and you have and lean on people around you. Some people, I think the key here for people listening to this is be willing to lean on and listen to the experience of others who've gone before you. And because sometimes people are too arrogant to take advice from others. And I'm like, listen, somewhere in China, there's probably a 12-year-old girl warming up with my squat backs. And if she can help me add 50 kilos to my squat, I'm down. Like, I don't care who you are. If you're going to help me improve, tell me, because I want to know. I got to train last year. I spent some time in Colorado and trained with Brian Shaw.
Wow.
It was a lot of fun. But one of the things I took away from him was that attitude. There was a point where he was training for Arnold Santa Monica at the time, and he was training the sandbag throw. And he asked me to film him on his phone. And then he asked me, he's like, just, do you see any technical issues, that I can prove on? And myself, I'm thinking, why are you asking this lowly 105K? You're a 4-time world's strongest man. Why do you care what I think? But his attitude was, hey, do you see something I could get better at? It was interesting because I actually did. When he would run out to the bag, he would bring the bag back. He would take 2 swings, and then he would adjust his stance. He would bring like his left foot in like an inch. It's like, and I showed him that on the video. And it's like, he knew after a couple swings, his stance wasn't where he wanted. He wasn't in a powerful position to throw. I'm like, man, if you could work on grabbing that bag and planting immediately in the spot you want to throw in, over the course of 6 to 8 bags, that's 6 to 8 seconds, 6 seconds of you just adjusting. And you're like, dude, that's awesome. I love that, and that was a little tiny thing I just happened to see on a video. But the bigger thing I walked away from that was like, here's Brian Shaw, 4-time world's strongest man. Here I am, like, who am I? And he doesn't care who you are. Like, if you can help him get better, he's all ears. I think that's important,
Yeah, definitely. It's very interesting as well. And I think lifters like that, athletes like that, who are willing to look to all corners of the community to improve, are those who are going to be able to consistently improve, because there's only so much you can gain from yourself ultimately. Hence the conversation we had earlier about accountability and coaching, no matter how high level of an athlete you are. It's curious actually as well, people talk about coaches, right? And they talk about how some people believe, you need to be a great athlete to be a great coach. And some athletes are not willing to hire coaches who haven't proven themselves as athletes and who are, more just coaches. But in this example, Brian is looking to a less experienced competitor for advice, because who knows, maybe you've got the intuitiveness in that moment to pick something out he might miss, especially because you can maybe see around his blind sides as well.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, my wife doesn't do strongman at all, has no interest in I've had her lift stones and stuff before, and she cheers me on, but her passion is not strongman. And I've been at contests before, and like in the moment, you're just so focused and whatever else. And, and she's come up and gotten my head straight and been like, oh, you have more in you. Like, one time we were doing deadlift jumps, and I honestly thought that I didn't have anything left in the tank. And the second I came over, she had the video. She was like, that was RPE 8. You have more in you. You need to go up, like make this jump. And I'm like, she knows nothing about the sport, and she knows I have more in me. You know, I'm like, I don't care who you are. If, you know, of course you have to be discerning. Don't go into Reddit and be looking for, you know, advice and stuff like that, because, you know, there's an underworld of people that don't know what they're talking about. But the point is just at least be open-minded, you know, to other people, because, you know, take it, try it. If it works, great. If it doesn't, discard it, but just be willing to learn.
Right. It's not a question of you kind of unthinkingly accepting dogma. It's
Right.
more you
And let me
looking at
throw
something and
something out
assessing
there.
it.
And I'll throw something out there too. The tips and tricks that I got, unless you're a really experienced athlete, don't be making game day adjustments. I mean, I tell this to my coach, to my clients all the time, like, you know, game day is not when we try a new grip technique or something else like that. If you see somebody doing something, if they go before you and you think, oh, that looks cool, make a mental note and try it when you get home, but compete how you've trained, right? The only time that I think you ever maybe adjust on the fly is if an event changes when you get there and you don't know, and you're all kind of discussing, hey, what do we do? Kind of deal like that. But just for anybody who's listening who might be an amateur strongman coming up, you know, these tips and tricks, like the thing about the grip, these were things I learned back in my training, right? Not like day of, right? We don't compete how you train.
And I would presume that also would apply to diet and nutrition as well.
100%, dude. I can't tell you how many times I get people will message me constantly. Hey, I've got a competition this week. What should I eat? What have you been eating?
Yeah.
Right. Right. Like, so obviously I will say competition is different than regular training day. So a lot of people tend to not hydrate as well as they think. A couple things I see that people do wrong and that I used to do wrong too is it's fun. There's a lot of energy and excitement and you want to cheer for all your friends. Don't do that. Like you can to a degree, and it's not that you're being a jerk, but there's 5 events over a long course of a day and they're maximal effort. So when you're done, get out of the sun, put a towel over your head, get your heart rate down, eat something, hydrate, get some salt in you, sip on water or whatever your hydration is, drink more than you think you need to, right? Because you're probably not, and chill, sit down and get your heart rate down. You know, I see a lot of guys, some people who are new and excited, they want to be on the sidelines cheering for every competitor, right? And that's great. I love the sportsmanship. I love the attitude. Like, you don't need to be a jerk about it. But I think one thing is people they don't take that time to lower their heart rate, come down a little bit, let your body relax, get some food in you, you know, in about 20 minutes, 15, 10 minutes before your turn to go. All right. Then you can start, you know, getting your head in the right space and start amping up a little bit and start getting yourself mentally prepared to go out and do what you're going to do. But people tend to just exert too much energy doing useless crap, running around between events, and they typically will not hydrate enough. I don't actually eat a ton while competing all throughout the day. I don't want a ton of stuff in my stomach. I'll eat a lot of oranges. I have with me at all times when I train a jar of honey. The reason I love oranges and honey is because they're both low on the glycemic index. You eat an orange, you're going to get that sugar from the juice right away, but the pulp and the fiber takes a while to digest. So instead of, you know, spiking your insulin and dropping you off a cliff, it's going to give you kind of a nice arc of energy. Same thing with honey. It's already partially digested. You're going to start absorbing it in your mouth right away. 1 tablespoon is 17 grams of carbohydrate, but it's not going to spike your insulin as quickly. So it's going to give you a nice arc of energy. So I'm eating oranges, you know, squeezing honey down my throat, and sometimes a peanut butter sandwich, depends. But I spend more time on hydration when I compete. And that's just me personally. But I'm not eating a ton of food. If I am eating a ton of food, I'm not eating a lot of fats. The reason I don't eat fat is because fat slows digestion down, right? And the whole point of eating is to get the energy into our gut, into our intestines, so we can push it out into our bloodstream and into our muscles to be used. If you're consuming a ton of fat, you're just delaying that process and leaving food in the stomach, and your blood flow is going to be directed to your stomach to aid in digestion versus being directed to your muscles, right? We want every little advantage we can have. So that's my personal strategy when I'm competing and how I eat, you know.
Okay, that's very interesting, and it kind of also goes back to your previous set of rules with regards to consistency. You know what works, you know, from a nutritional standpoint, but also what works for you psychologically in terms of this is my routine, this is what I have with me to rely on, and
Correct.
what to do and what not to do. It's interesting as well with regards to how you talked about being you're quite a happy lifter when you hype up.
Yes.
I would imagine that kind of thing also plays into your consistency on game day. So if you're a happy lifter consistently, perhaps now may not be the time to become an existential angst lifter all of a sudden when you're very used to that method of achieving arousal before a lift.
Right. Right. I will say I speak from an experience of a weight class athlete who cuts a lot of weight and has to recomp it. So, I do there are some differences if you're an open competitor. I don't think you have to be as concerned with things like fats in your diet because they're in a caloric surplus and have been for a long time. Whereas weight class athletes who are cutting weight, the chances of you fully replenishing your glycogen stores in 24 hours are pretty low, especially because to do that, you have to have a high degree of discipline to really eat all that you need. And everything just needs to be on point. So most people are coming into a contest, unless you're getting IVs, which I do now. But unless you're getting, and even that has just to do with the hydration, with the saline and things like that, you're probably not fully, if you've been, like what I do 25-pound water cut. If you're depleting all that glycogen, you're probably not 100%, refilled on game day. So that's why my nutrition still has to have a rhythm and a strategy to it. If you're an open class athlete, just eat like you've been eating during training. Now's not the time to try the new spicy habanero wings from the place down the right. We don't want gastric issues. Right. So I think it is context dependent a little bit there because open athletes are a little bit different than a weight class athlete. I think it'd be the only caveat I'd make to that.
Okay, I see. And you yourself are a weight class athlete, and
yes,
as you mentioned earlier, you usually walk around above your weight cutoff by some margin.
I walk around about 118 to 120 kilo, and I cut to 105.
Wow. So with that in mind, then what motivates you to compete in 105 as opposed to just carrying on and moving into open, given you can walk around that heavy?
If I had started Strongman younger, maybe I would have. I think I'm competitive at 105 naturally. I'll be honest with you. I got up to 125 kilos for the Arnold ones because I have competed in open twice. And I do okay with it. I do okay in local shows. I've won some local shows as a heavyweight. But I think I would still have a lot of work to do to be super competitive as an open heavyweight, even in the amateur scene. Be perfectly honest with you, I don't like how I feel that heavy. I mean, I'm right at 6 foot even. And when I get to 125 kilos, I don't sleep as well. I'm huffing and puffing. And I like to hunt. I like to be active outside and things like that. So to be perfectly honest, one time in my life, I would love to try and get to 145 kilos or 150 kilos just to see. I've thought about it, but I don't honestly know the work involved. I mean, I truly think it is harder to eat for size like that than it is to diet. Like I had to work really hard. I was eating 6,500 plus calories a day and it was hard to put on weight, for those dudes out there who think, I'll just take loads of steroids and eat all this food and I'll just get huge and jacked. Good luck. Tell me how that works out for you. It's a lot harder than you think. And so being that I'm a husband, father with kids and stuff like that, I don't like feeling like shit. Like I can't get down on the floor and play with them. Like I get winded in the backyard if I'm running around with my kids. So staying at a slightly lighter weight class for me, 115 kilos, fairly lean and strong is kind of where I like to be.
Right. So there's an aspect of health and longevity to it as well as competitiveness. Absolutely. I see.
Yeah, like I said, I started Strongman when I was 27. I'm 34 now. If I had started younger, perhaps I would have pushed the envelope even further, especially if I started pre-children. Who knows? But, where I am now, I enjoy what I'm doing. I enjoy how I feel, how I look, how I perform. I still have some strength goals I want to hit. I eventually will try bodybuilding just because I think it's cool. I respect it. I like strength and performance though. So I have this, I like doing things kind of on our earlier conversation of manufacturing hardness. I like doing hard things just to see if I can, just to do it. I've run a marathon. It was awful. I hate it. I will never run 26.2 miles again in my life. Not going to happen. I've done a 13.5 mile Tough Mudder. Like, no, I don't want to do that again. It was awful. I've done CrossFit, I've done all these things. And so I will do bodybuilding at one point, mainly to say I did. I might like it. I might hate it, but I'm just going to do it at some point to say I did, but I'm going to focus. I'm going to try and hit some strength goals first.
Right. So the different, just the challenge that is inherent to different physical pursuits is appealing in of
Yes.
itself. I think bodybuilding is an interesting one. I've had a few folk on here who have dabbled in bodybuilding prior to strength, actually,
Yeah.
and it's always kind of the same answer, really. It's that, was it incredibly challenging and brutal? Yes. Did I enjoy it? Absolutely not. And there's a certain kind of person who gravitates towards that kind of
Right.
lifestyle, and it may not be the cup of tea of most strength athletes, but I think it's definitely worthy of respect.
I respect the hell of it. I'm not saying this to shit on bodybuilding at all. I respect it a lot. I think my philosophy has been to kind of maybe wait till I'm a washed up strength athlete, like push my body as hard as I possibly can while I'm still able to function well, and then I've accumulated some injuries along the way, right? I just had my bicep repaired, which is not a big deal. A lot of people do it in Strongman. I have my 6-week post-op checkup today. Everything looks good. I'm pushing it hard. But as you get older and the injuries start piling up, when that time comes to say maybe competitive strength is going to take a backseat, then I'll do bodybuilding. You can work around some of those things, and you can isolate muscle groups a lot more. You can do bodybuilding while you're an injured strongman. Strongman takes a beating on the body. So, but I'll probably wait a little while and push myself as far as I can strength wise.
Right. And I think as well that there is somewhat of a distinction between bodybuilding training, which most people do. Let's be honest, most average people who walk in the gym, they do bodybuilding training, right? And then
Right.
competitive bodybuilding, which is not quite a sport, not quite an art, kind of a little bit in between,
It's an art and a science, man. You're playing with your genetics, but I mean, yeah, a lot of people will come into the gym and they'll do 4 sets of 12 or 3 sets of 10, right? Because that's just what they know. That's what pops up on bodybuilding.com. But yeah, when you're into it for a prep and you have a good coach, they're going to be pairing exercises well, that if they're working to build glutes, we're going to get something that hits the lengthened portion and the shortened end, and then we'll work with the mid-range on this day, and then you're figuring out total volume, and you have to are you going to use drop sets, giant sets? Are you going to use rest pause? Are you going to take sets to failure? How do you accumulate? There's a lot of it takes a lot and a really smart coach to line out a full cycle so that you're constantly progressively overloading. And I think that's the difference between just kind of dabbling and people that go in the gym and they'll just, throw something on the bench and hit 3 sets of 10 versus somebody who comes in and, hits 3 sets of 10 with intention, right? And maybe they're coming down with a 2 to 3 second descent, full pause, and then come back up, and whatever the case might be. I think that's the difference.
Right. And it's interesting as well, like from a coaching standpoint, there are a lot of people who coach bodybuilding training for the purpose of like recomposition and hypertrophy, achieving a better physique, right? This is what most people in the general public want to achieve. But then if you look at pro bodybuilding coaching, the vast majority of what it seems to be pharmacology and very much less about training in nutrition and pharmacology. And then training is kind of on the side for a lot of these guys.
Which is sad. I think it's starting to, I hope it's changing. I've been fortunate that I've been around, like the bodybuilders that I've been around are really, really intelligent. They're the top of the line. I don't know if you're familiar with the company Revive MD out of Florida.
Is that Matt Jansen?
It's Matt Jansen.
Yeah.
Okay. I knew Matt. So Matt and I trained at the same gym together. He's 4 or 5 years younger than me. I remember when he was a skinny little stick of a freshman coming in. Tyler Bedson also trains at that gym. He's a good coach. Nicole and Alan Kress work down there at Revive now, and he's kind of one of their functional medicine guys. Nicole trains my wife and coaches her. So I've always been fortunate. I kind of spent a lot of time going to their seminars. Bodybuilders are light years ahead of strength athletes when it comes to nutrition and biomechanics. Like strength athletes, we're like a bunch of cavemen. We eat whatever's in front of us and we don't care how we do it, just move the weight. And so I've actually spent a lot more of my time going to bodybuilding training or like seminars and things like that to learn about nutrition and health and longevity. And I've been gifted to and fortunate enough to have always been around really solid bodybuilders. So I've kind of been able to avoid the bro science. And all those people that I just mentioned to you are really making a big effort to keep health and longevity on the front end, and inject it into the sport as well. So they're the only coach. They're not the only coaches. I could list 15 other coaches, and there's a movement that's growing towards functional medicine, to where now, I've coached a couple people to the stage, and the first thing that I'll do when I get anybody is, guys, I want to see their blood work. Females, I want to see their blood work in a hormone panel. And if we're not ready to put you on the stage, I'm going to have an honest conversation with you and say, we're not ready to put you on the stage. And a lot of coaches will just be like, oh, you want to compete in 20 weeks? Yeah, pay me $1,500, and here's some Anavar and some Clen, and we'll get you to it. And they wreck people's health in the process. And these people are too ignorant; they don't know. So I've been fortunate to be around some really good coaches that really take a strong interest in health and put their clients' health first. So I've avoided a lot of that, but that does still exist. It's sad. I think you have a couple people. You have that world that just kind of pushes drugs for everything as the solution. And then you still have, I think, the idea, the phrase a reverse diet or, functional nutrition, those two phrases alone didn't exist 10 years ago. Or if they did, they existed among a handful of people. I think you have a lot of coaches out there who are hanging on to the old methods. I still see bodybuilders doing crazy water and sodium manipulation loads the week of contest, as if they're like a strength athlete trying to deplete. I'm like, listen, what drives inflammation? Stress. If you were not ready to step on stage 1 week out, you're not ready. Peak week should be as stress-free as possible. You should be trying to calm them down. You should be driving down systemic inflammation. You should be slowly titrating carbs up to make them fuller. And your training shouldn't be anything that trains the end range of motion, because that's going to drive inflammation. We want short pumps. So it's all of this sort of stuff. But, if people aren't keeping up with the science and the advances, I think a lot of coaches don't keep up with continuing education. I think that's a shame. And the more that science advances, we learn more and more. I think coaches should always be doing their best to try and keep on the edge and stay, learning what's new and how to better keep people healthy if they want to do it right.
Yeah, no, and I recall you making a post about that, the kind of constant education of a coach, and it's fascinating because it's both individual, to yourself, what you want to do with your business, but also to the kind of zeitgeist of sport, of what's happening in the community. And as you described with bodybuilding, there are people now who are focusing more on longevity, on sustainable pharmacology, and on nutrition and biomechanics, which is fascinating. And it's very interesting to see that come into strength sport. Like, I really admire what you do, harmonizing nutrition and performance as one, right? A lot of strength athletes have a nutritionist and then they have a strength coach, but they're very divorced from each other.
You're onto something big here. People are just now learning. You would never think of not periodizing your training, but nobody periodizes nutrition. Nutrition has to be periodized. And I do coach a lot of people who I only do their nutrition. And one of the first things I will ask is, let me see your training plan. I need to see that. I need to see blood work. I want to see all these things, because all of that's going to inform what we do. I just had a guy come back with his blood work and his triglycerides are through the roof. And so that's going to inform how we supplement. That's going to inform how much red meat, dairy we put in his diet. And all these considerations go into play. Now, naturally, when I'm putting together the plans myself, I have a little bit more control over that. But I absolutely will do nutrition only, but I always want to see their plan first. If somebody is training and they have, maybe they're in a metabolic phase and they're doing just tons of prowler sprints and just there's a high glycolytic demand. Well, there needs to be the carbohydrates to support that. And then if they move into a different phase of training, we have to adjust carbs and fats and things appropriately for their goals, but also to match the training so that we're not burning them out. And so I think a lot of people just completely, like you said, they just divorce the two. And if you want to make the most progress, you have to marry the two. Then another thing I'm passionate about too is, in strongman, let's be real. guys and girls are going to run drugs. That's just how it is. I firmly believe that a lot of the risk can be mitigated and people can do it intelligently. A lot of people are running too much for too long with zero idea of what it's doing to them. They'll get blood work, 5 weeks after a cycle and be like, see, everything's good. That's not the point. What did it do to you during the cycle, right? So get blood work smack dab in the middle. But then also, did you get blood work to start? There's so many considerations. And the problem is so many people get their science or their data rather off of Reddit or other online forums. And, you still have myths running around. Well, this drug is good for cutting and this drug is good for bulking. That's not how they work at all. From a physiological standpoint, it's very individual, but I would also say, some guys, the compounds they choose should be based on individual strengths and weaknesses and the events in a show. For example, Strongman is moving to a very medley heavy route. If you're running trend, that's a really poor choice, right? Because that's going to negatively impact your cardio, and just simple things like that, or not getting blood work done at all, just playing the game of, we'll see what it looks like. But then two, people can make wise decisions, not use as much. I think people rely on drugs too much, and the solution is they hit a plateau, and instead of looking at their training, their recovery, nutrition, they just add more drugs. And I'm like, well, that's not how that works. And I think it's sad really that that's the place that we've been to, but I think the reason people don't want to do it is it's inconvenient, it's time consuming, and frankly, it's expensive. Steroids are not that expensive. What's expensive is your cabinet full of ancillaries that you should be taking along with these things, right? That's where it gets expensive. Instead you have these guys who got $150 in a card from grandma for their birthday. So they go buy a bottle of test and some D-ball and just start throwing it in their body with zero clue of what it's actually doing to them. And so that's something that I'm aiming to help people do a little bit more intelligently is, hey, you can be savagely strong and healthy. That's possible. Like it can be done. And so that's something that I'm kind of trying to continue push forward to people is, hey, if we're going to do this, let's do it intelligently. Let's take a long approach, a long look. Let's get your health. Let's get your blood work. Let's get your hormones if you're a female. And let's look at your training. Let's look at your nutrition, and let's make a plan and put it all together correctly versus just, taking whatever your friend at the gym hands you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things there that are fascinating. Firstly, as you said earlier, kind of borrowing somewhat from some aspects of bodybuilding coaching's approach to really marry the let's be honest, the necessary impact of pharmaceuticals and nutrition and training to create a strength athlete who is capable of doing what they do for a long time. Because I actually had a Pete Rubish on here a few weeks ago, and he spoke about this, how even 10 years ago, powerlifters would do whatever they wanted, eat like absolute shit, and take drugs until they couldn't take drugs anymore. And then they fall off the map, and that's the end of that. And that was kind of an accepted reality of strength. Is like, if you're going to be super strong, you're going to do it for 8 to 10 years, and then you may or may not die at 50. It's just part of the game, right? And that became kind of an accepted truth in the sport. And if you were long-lived in the sport, it became somewhat of an anomaly almost. And especially to be someone like Pete, who is now completely 180 from that lifestyle and had completely rebuilt himself, is almost unheard of in the kind of popular strength culture. And what was really interesting about that as well was the role of genetics, and how you may have great tolerance to drugs. You may have, for some time, you may manage your nutrition, but who knows how your body reacts to, your heart reacts to cholesterol over 20 years. What is your likelihood of becoming pre-diabetic from insulin use, right? What is your predisposition to cancer from growth hormone use? Who knows? You don't know, right? Did your parents use exogenous growth hormone? Probably
exactly.
not.
Well, not only that, because most of these things are legal in the US, there's not nearly the amount of research because there's no funding for it because it's illegal. So we don't have a ton of research. We have, hearsay, and we have a lot of bro science. Unless the drugs are also used in a pharmacological setting, in a medicinal setting, and are prescribed. But yeah, you're not going to find government funded research on bathtub trend. It's not going to happen.
Which is so sad almost, because it means that athletes are damaging their bodies based off of half truths and old information potentially,
Yeah.
and also the quality potentially of the pharmaceuticals that they receive it is also detrimental to their health.
It's funny because, I mean, I believe this for a long time. I mean, even the cycle that I ran most recently, it's like every cycle that I run, I actually run less and less and less and less. It's funny because some people, when they would see what I would be on, would be like, that's it. And when I tore my bicep, I just thought, well, this is a good time to come down to low TRT levels. I'll be on TRT the rest of my life for just a health standpoint of the fact that many guys having low testosterone is also impactful to your, negatively impactful to your heart. So I'm an advocate of TRT, but I came down to 125 milligrams of test, and that's it. And in the last 7 weeks, I just showed my wife a screenshot, I mean, of just how dramatically my deep sleep has improved. My resting heart rate is so low. I feel fantastic. And here's the kicker. I'm still getting stronger.
Right.
Now, as fast, sure, no, not as fast. They work, drugs work. But the point is, I don't need a ton. I'm on 125 milligrams of testosterone, and I haven't front squatted in almost 3 months, and I hit 500 really easily yesterday, and I've been pounding my legs, 2 to 3 days a week, eating a ton of protein, doing a lot of cardio, and, I'm training this side really hard. I'm doing a lot of unilateral work, and I'm still getting stronger. I mean, like, it's just funny to me. People think that drugs are magic, and they're not. I mean, they work. Otherwise people wouldn't do them. They absolutely work, but they're like, what, 5% of the equation? Your training and your nutrition, your diet, all that stuff, that's the rest. That's the big buckets, and I think people need to understand that.
Right. And it's a very valuable and certainly not understated message, I think, at this point, because there is as well, I think, a very much a psychological component to continued PD use, which is the idea that, if I'm this strong at, with 500 mgs of test, what am I going to be like at a gram? What am I going to be like when I put this compound in? And it goes up like that. And then the inverse of that is, when I take away this compound, how much am I going to lose? How bad
It's
am I
really
going to look?
funny, and
Right?
this is where I wish some more experienced athletes would speak up. First off, you're never going to be at 100% all the time. Like, I can't pull my max deadlift every day. That's not possible. My personal goal is to always stay within 90% of my bests. If I'm within 90% of my best, I'm still progressing, right? So just keep that in mind. But this is where, if people would just do what they're supposed to do, get blood work on your various cycles. So, all right, fine. Run 400 megs of test E and get your labs done and track your progress. And then run 600 to 700 and tell me, was it that much better? Because I've done that in my younger years when I was dumb, and before I started really caring about health, I've done that stuff more just as a scientific experiment. There's a law of diminishing returns, man. I've run really high trend and felt like dog shit to the point where I want to fall asleep during training. I'm not sleeping at night. My sleep apnea is through the roof, so I'm not recovering. So is it making me stronger? Sort of, but not really. So then all the gains that I am getting, they're going to go away the second I stop the trend.
Right.
Whereas if I'm sleeping well, eating right, like, those gains are still there. I mean, I'm on 125 megs of test, and since I started working on growing my quads, I've grown them in the last 8 weeks. I've grown them a half an inch. I have 31.5-inch quads. Like, it's training, it's diet, it's hard freaking work. It's not drugs. So sure, if you train like an absolute idiot and inject tons of tren, you'll be stronger than you were, and probably the strongest guy in your local gym for a couple months. But at some point, you're going to come off of it, and you're going to feel like crap, and you're going to look like crap, and your health is going to be crap. You know what I mean? Like, I've come off of pretty much everything. I'm down to 125. They give more testosterone to 50-year-old men than I'm taking right now. And to be perfectly honest, I feel better than I ever have, and still freaking strong. And I haven't lost all this size because I'm sleeping great. I'm eating a crap ton of protein and vegetables and fruits and getting the micronutrients, and I move around a lot. Super simple. I wish people would learn this.
Right. And people also don't appreciate the kind of cumulative external effect of other things in your life. Because when you're
Yes.
focused on training, you are very focused on training, and you think about, oh, I'm going to feel incredible in the gym for that hour and a half that I'm there to train when I'm on this compound. But if this compound makes you an absolute asshole
Right.
because you can't handle what it does to your brain, so then your girlfriend breaks up with you, and then you have all that emotional stress, and then
Right.
you know act like a dick at work, and then you lose your job. Now you can't find, and it's a very over dramatic scenario. But my point being, what you
No, I've seen it
do
happen, man. I've been
creates
in the sport.
circumstances that affect your training, and even
Listen,
on
dude,
the
I've been in the
physiological
sport for
level.
a long time. I've been in the sport for a long time. I've seen a lot of relationships ruined over it. I have seen drops lost over it. All those things that you just said, they're reality. I've seen people like mess their lives up over drugs. And I'm like, and then half the time I look at their training, I'm like, they're not even that strong. Like, what are you doing? And I think honestly, I got very fortunate. It's not like I'm some brilliant guy who just has my shit together and figured it all out. No, I've made plenty of mistakes, and so I try to keep people from making the same ones I did. But like I said, I was very fortunate in the gym that I came up in. I just had a lot of really great athletes around me. I mean, Pete Rubish and I trained together for the year and a half he lived in Lexington. We were at the same gym. So I know Pete, I've gone out and trained with Travis Ortmeyer. I've trained with Brian Shaw. I've trained Matt Jansen and Tyler Bedson. And like, I can name drop all these people. And it's not like I'm anybody special. I just happen to live where they all were, right? At one given point in time, and connect with them and be friends with them. And so I've had a lot of great people around me. Again, that goes back to that teachable spirit. Have a teachable mind, right? Travis has been in the sport like 3 times as long as I have. And so I've learned a lot from him just talking. And so I've been fortunate to be around a lot of good people that have kind of helped me, kind of shape me into kind of the philosophies I have today.
Right. And you as a result of all of those external influences, you ultimately become that person down the line who imparts
Right.
that wisdom
Exactly.
on your clients or those who see you and speak to you in turn. So it creates this kind of
Exactly.
legacy, right?
That's right. Yep.
No, it's very, very interesting. And given that we're kind of closing out our time, unfortunately, honestly, because I could, as we said
We'll have to do
before,
it again
carry,
sometime.
we shall indeed. Um, what would you say is the most rewarding aspect of what you do, both as a coach and an athlete?
Well, as a coach, I mean, I just love people having the aha moments. For me, I deal with a lot of strength athletes, particularly females. Like I said, a lot of females really get beat down by an over sexualized culture that says you have to look this way or you're not valuable. And then it also at the same time peddles them bullshit diets. And so I love the aha moments when females start to really see results and they're eating more than they've ever eaten and their life is way less restrictive. So that's fun. And guys as well. But like I said, guys are a lot easier to deal with. Most of us just overeat like assholes and don't move enough. So it's pretty,
Fair
you know,
enough.
I'm being overly simplistic, but it's the case most of the time. So that's fun. It's just helping people um, see the aha moments for themselves. As an athlete, hands down the community, because it's formed some of the best friendships I've had, in my life have come through the sport. So, I'll always be involved in it in some way, just for that simple reason alone, because of the friendships and things like that.
Right. No, and truly, there is this has been a recurrent theme, honestly, amongst the people I've spoken to, and for myself as well, to speak personally, the amount you can gain from the community, and also the amount you can give back to the
Yes.
community. It's so readily available. It's so easy to give that advice, like you described those athletes, doing, being holding someone accountable, or simply supporting someone, or giving that individual that moment of clarity, that aha moment that they
Yes.
may not have had whilst they're your clients and you're in a working relationship. They're part of that overarching community that drives
Yep.
to become better in some capacity, right?
Absolutely.
And it's a beautiful thing, really. I would say I'm grateful for it every day as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And couldn't agree more.
Awesome, man. And finally, before we close up today, is there any one thing one piece of advice you'd like to give those listening when it comes to all of the topics we've discussed, if you can
We've
possibly
discussed a
condense
lot
it?
of topics, man. I think, well, a recurring theme, like I said, is just be a willingness to learn. I would say if you're an amateur strongman out there, wanting to kind of do well, get a coach. And if I get it too, sometimes money is tight, and you can't afford an individual coach. I don't know if you've spoken with Anthony Furman yet, but his Strength League Collective, I think is really cool. I think it's a really cool initiative that he's going up for a very, very low fee. I think like what, 10, 15 bucks a month, something goofy like that. You have access to a ridiculous amount of programs from really high quality people. And I know many of them. And so honestly, I would direct amateurs that route, because if cost is a limiting factor, that's the one thing that's wonderful. That's one of the one things that's wonderful about the internet and social media nowadays, is you can get quality information out. That's why I think the bar of strength has risen so high as it has. And so I would direct people there. I mean, I'm always willing and open to work with anybody, but like I said, if finances are a limiter, go there. Right. And if you really dig into it and really love it and eventually want to pursue, then you can look out and get something that's a little bit more individualized for you. But I would just say to everybody, don't, if you don't know what you're doing, don't try and go it alone. There's a whole community of people out there willing to help you.
Right. Awesome. And certainly Strength Collective is very, very, very interesting and very accessible as well. So anyone who is listening to this, watching this, I highly recommend you check that out as well. And if you do need an individual coach, be sure to contact Anthony as well. And I will leave your Instagram details in the video description as well, so people can get in touch with you. Awesome. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today, man. And I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Yeah, let's do this again sometime. It was a blast.
Awesome. All right. Take care, man.
See you, buddy.